There's a lot of talk in the axe throwing industry about the different woods that people are using. Wanted to make a short little video and show you what we do for Excitement, our company, excitement.com. We do projection target lanes. We're going to take a look at those in a bit, but we use end grain wood that we're throwing at instead of standard pine, and even the rage now being cottonwood and willows, etc. So what I have here are the three different woods. This is a standard pine board. This is a cottonwood board that we got from one of the distributors that sells cottonwood for axe throwing. And here's some plain old pressure treated 6x6 post. So the first thing we're going to do is water these down. Okay, so all of them are going to see a benefit from being watered. Okay, so we want the grain to open up a little bit, be a little softer for hits, make our axes stick better, make the boards last longer. All right, we use a electric waterer, which you hear going off now. Makes it easier to put a lot of water down. So we got a lot of water on the boards right now. We're going to let that soak in for a minute. We're using a standard conventional axe coal bolt that we get from Lowe's. This is a new one, so it'll be nice and sharp. And so there's our axe. So we're going to talk about what's happening when you throw at these different types of woods. And the best demonstration for that is probably this whisk broom, okay? So in effect, what you have with wood is it forms a grain. So here's our grain of wood, much like the grains running up and down that you can see on both of these boards or on the side of this board. Here is this grain. And if you throw an axe and you happen to hit directly with that grain, it penetrates very easily. The problem is if you hit across the grain, it doesn't want to penetrate. So it's going to break fibers, which is going to cause your boards to chip. So if somebody throws and they happen to hit straight and it's at a point in the board where it's not moving side to side or curving and it hits, the axe should go in pretty easily. But again, crossways, not so good. So with an end grain target, what you have is just like the broom, we are throwing at the end of the grain. So here, whether or not it hits in this direction or this direction or this direction, the axe easily goes in, and it's not breaking the fibers when it does. So it heals easier. When you pull it out, it's not going to leave as many broken fibers, and so the boards last much, much longer. Just as an example, if we take a look at this board right here, and we're just going to hit it, and I'll be using equal pressure every time I throw, not throw, but swing. So if we go here, it didn't even stick, okay, here. All right, there I did a little more, and so we did stick. We're slightly cross grain, so another one there is going to cause a chip. All right, let's do another. Okay, it doesn't stick. If I go into the cottonwood with the same pressure, it does stick. So cottonwood obviously is working better than what a standard board does. These are barely penetrating and sometimes not at all, okay? So we do that. The problem with both of them is if we cross grain them, they don't want to stick. So even though I'm throwing with the same pressure, because I'm going across the grain, my axe is not going to stick. It's just going to bounce off, which frustrates the throwers. With a end grain, it doesn't matter what direction you hit, it's going to stick no matter what. Okay, that's the big advantage of an end grain target. I can hit in this direction, I can hit over here, and no matter how you hit, it wants to stick. And you'll see that when we pull these out, they have a tendency of healing much better than a standard board. So these are my axe hits here versus the axe hits on these other boards will leave a groove that is going to help it chip and break down faster. So if I'm dealing with an end grain target here, even just any angle there, it happened to be with that, but the same thing across it, it wants to stick no problem. While here with a cottonwood, if I go with it, it sticks good, but if I hit across it, it doesn't want to, and it just leaves a big gouge. All right, so if somebody's throwing like that, they're not sticking and your targets are getting beat up. Now it's true this is going to last longer since it's easier to stick if they're straight, but you will still find you're going to be replacing these boards much more often than you would an end grain. Typically, people are saying that their standard boards with heavy use are getting about an hour and a half until you have to change out your center board for your targets. With cottonwood, you might expand that 3 or 4 or 5 times. With our end grain, we're seeing our targets get 100 hours before we end up changing a single block. And the beauty of this is when we are done with 100 hours, we can flip it over and we can go for the back side of the block just as easily and use both sides, so we get hundreds of hours without having to change our blocks. Now, making the blocks is a little more difficult, making the targets is a little more difficult, but you never have downtime when you're open on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Friday. And instead of people bouncing off targets or having these knot issues, like here, even though it's cottonwood, we've got a bad knot there, it's not going to stick no matter what. While with these, since you're only using little pieces, if there's a knot, you can reject that and just use another chunk of the end grain, and it's going to stick much easier. All right, so there is the description of standard wood versus cottonwood versus end grain wood. So here we're going to take a look at the target made with end grain wood. You can see that using 6x6s, we do a 7 across 7 tall, and that gives us our target. Since all of our targets are projected, it gives us lots of advantages. Like we can have a scoreboard up at the top. It's a customized scoreboard. It can hold your logo. We can have games to where the target moves each shot. So one time the bullseye is going to be at the lower corner, the upper corner, so it moves around the board. That way you're not wearing out the same piece of your board each time. We also have advantages of other games. For example, you can shoot at zombies, which we have different scoring based on which zombie you hit. And again, customized scoreboard up above where you can set your names and all that kind of stuff. Another real popular game for us right now is tic-tac-toe, where you can sit there and when you throw and you hit here, that lets you just click on that box and it will give you your X or O depending on whose turn it is. When somebody wins, they light up green. But let's take a closer look at the end grain so we can see what's happening. This target is at least 30 or 40 hours of throwing time at it, and we haven't done anything to it other than water it occasionally. If we check our bullseye, we can see there's a little bit of chopping that's gone on here, but from this distance you can't even tell. And if anything, it makes it easier to stick when you throw into here. So when we're sitting here chopping into here, it's still gonna work out just fine. And we can see that even with just a very light touch of the axe, these things stick no problem in our end grain. And again, when we remove that, it is so self-healing, you can't even hardly see where the hole was. It doesn't leave cracks the way standard boards do, because we're going in the end of the broom, so to speak. So that's why we prefer an end grain target that lets us have lots of variation in the games, lasts much longer, increases how the enjoyment level is for the customers. Also, we can throw other objects more easily, like ninja stars can stick very easy in the end grains because it's so much softer to go into than a standard board. So we hope you enjoyed the explanation of the benefits of end grain and projected targets. Remember, we're not actually in the axe throwing business. If you charge people just to take an axe and throw it down a hallway, they wouldn't want to stay for too long. We're in the axe sticking business.